done. My diabolical plan. Here we go. Are you?
I'm not counting today.
She usually
How long have
hires
you been doing
someone
this
to
job?
do that.
Turn it on, Alexandra.
All right, hello everybody out there in the audio podcast world. My name is Paul Carganilla. I am the host of the Titanic Legacy podcast.
I'm James Penca, host of the Witness Titanic podcast.
I'm Alexandra Boyd, co-host of Titanic Talk with
Nelson Aspen, alphabetically prominent.
And for the first time, we would like to say hello to our live studio audience, as this is our first live podcast. Say hello to our audience.
It's a good-looking bunch you put together, Paul.
Well, one side of it, actually. What? I don't think you're better, right? Not the better half. Well, we were just chatting, and as we were putting together a guest list for Titanic Weekend here on the Queen Mary, I realized, this amazing tool. Obviously, the internet is a multifaceted tool, but one arm of that, one channel that kind of is bringing everybody together is this newfangled podcasts thing. And I call it newfangled, it's probably like 15, 20 years old now. But as far, I was reflecting on the Titanic community that I enjoy, that we like to connect with, and the content that I consume. And I was listening to a podcast called Unsinkable, the Titanic podcast, hosted by LA Beatles. And I heard about this documentary that was coming out because she had as guests on her show Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd to talk about Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries. And so I started listening to their podcast, Titanic Talk, and on their podcast they had a guest by the name of James Penca, and I got to know James on their podcast. And the way it's just all came together and connected, and I looked at the roster for this weekend and I thought, well, we gotta have, and we were thinking, has this ever happened before?
I can't imagine. And what's remarkable to me is that in most, dare I call it, entertainment communities, it's territorial, and people don't like to share. And that is completely the opposite of what we experience in our podcast community. We love to share. We love to be on each other's shows and support each other, and there is no real competition, and it's a magical, wonderful thing.
What do you think, James?
Yeah, I mean, three podcasts podcasting at the same time on a single podcast. That's pretty cool. I'm happy to be here.
And we were positing that it's probably the first time it's ever happened as far as in the Titanic community goes. I know that people like to get together and support each other, and that has been so important. And I think as I bring up all the time, and I talked to yesterday here in one of the, I think our first speaker presentation, is how Clifford Ismay said on the first episode of my show, Titanic was designed and built to bring people together. She never got to do that, but she's still doing it today, which is amazing. What has your experience been in the podcast realm? I'll start with Alexandra. Whose idea was it to start Titanic Talk?
Well, this idea of Nelson and I having a chat show. In England, we have chat shows. Graham Norton's chat show. And you call them talk shows, we call them chat shows, because we're having a chat. And Nelson and I met in New York in 1989. And he was like, I want a chat show, I want a talk show, and I want a talk show with you. And I was like, how is that going to happen? It wasn't in on my horizon. I was pursuing acting. I ended up in Los Angeles. And so did you, but the chat show didn't happen. But look, we've got a chat show now. We chat about Titanic.
Think of all the chat we wasted all those years just starting private conversations.
I don't think anybody thought it was wasted. No, it wasn't lost anyway. But because Ship of Dreams is an independent film, and we had an idea to independently release it on Vimeo. We thought we'd find our audience there, but it's hard. It's really hard as an independent filmmaker. If you don't have studio behind you, if you don't have a huge PR budget, it's all on you. And you're on Facebook and you're looking for the Titanic groups and you're this and that and the other. And one of those ways we recognized was a podcast, because you and I can talk. We can talk, and we can talk about Titanic. And the other thing was that, a little bit like you saw yesterday, I can only scratch the surface of those diaries that everybody wrote. Mine's 19 pages long. And, we wanted to bring back those actors to talk individually about their participation in the film. Some of the actors that I didn't put in the film have been on the podcast, and then why stop there? Let's go to explorers and authors and anybody, because when you find somebody's connected to Titanic, they have something to talk about.
We find when we look at the numbers and the reach, because we're on all the platforms, and we always include YouTube because it's fun to have our faces on, and we like to put in B-roll and images that you don't get from the audio-only outlets. But while the numbers, when you look at them, may not seem impressive compared to, say, television or radio, I'm learning that it has this kind of the magical staying power, the podcast. People, for the presidential election, they claim was won by podcasts. But there may be something to that. People will discover you eventually. Once the podcast is there, it's there until you take it down. So you don't have to, it doesn't have to be appointment participation from the audience. And I'm finding that as I promote my book now, that doing the podcast has real results in the book sales. I'm an old school guy that loves to be on TV and loves to do the radio, but I think the real bang for the buck comes from the podcast.
If you're not a super huge podcast, I think that what makes your show successful is, and this is the thing about with podcasting as a medium, it's got to be something niche, something that people have a very specific interest in. And I think Titanic, a real reason that had so many Titanic podcasts have popped up over the past few years is because I don't think we can talk about it enough. I mean, that's why we're here on the Queen Mary, it's just to talk about Titanic and remember her.
And people can't listen enough. People,
Right.
the appetite is voracious.
What was the origin story of Witness Titanic?
So I had been told for years that I need to have a Titanic podcast because when I'm at a bar with friends, I'm just sitting there talking about the Titanic, whether they like it or not. And people would, maybe this is their way of telling me to stop talking. Say, James, you really should have a podcast. You say this for your podcast. And I never really wanted to do it because, and it's similar to my, if I ever were to write a book about Titanic, I have no interest in doing that or doing a podcast unless it was something that I felt like wasn't out there currently. I've read enough books to know that I can't offer anything that my favorite book doesn't have, or this favorite book doesn't have. And then, you guys have podcasts, and Unsinkable is a great podcast. Like, what would I really be bringing to the table? So I needed the thing that would make me feel like, oh, that's something that we don't have right now, and that's something that I'd like to provide. And so, in my work with Titanic Honor and Glory, I'm always reading through survivor testimony, and it has over the years has become my favorite thing about what I do, is just reading words, whether it's newspapers, inquiry, mostly the inquiry, but newspapers, memoirs, there's so many great books where people have compiled the best stuff, but if you really dig deeper and deeper, you can just come across things that you never knew before, and you want to tell everybody. And then one day they just popped together, and I thought, I want to do a podcast specifically about survivor testimony. And when I would tell people the idea, everyone's first thought was like, great, you can reenact them, because I'm an actor originally. And every time I go, nah, I don't really want to do that actually. What I want to do is I want to read parts of it in my own voice. I don't want to necessarily be a character or anything like that. I can't do accents that well. I can just read sections of the testimony and then stop and talk about it and add some context and things that people might not know about what these words are saying. and just have it be more of a conversation. And I thought, that's not out there right now. I think the testimony gets left behind too much for the usual talking points that we've all heard in documentaries and articles and stuff. Like there's some stuff in there that we're just not talking about enough. And so that was the inspiration. And suddenly I thought, I want to do a podcast now. Like I finally have my thing that I want to do. And the second I started working on the first episode, I was like, you feel that that you get ignited inside. And I've learned in my life, if I'm not feeling that, then I shouldn't be working on this project because I'm just forcing myself to do something. But the second I get ignited, I can work overnight, 48 hours, no sleep. I'm so excited about this idea. And then, episode, they're a lot of work, but every time I work on them, they just feel so good. And that's when I know I'm doing the thing I should be doing. So it just came from finding the thing that would make the podcast have a purpose. I didn't just want to, I didn't want to start at the beginning and go through the story again. I wanted to do it a different way.
One of the most exciting things about living this life on this planet for me is when a fire is lit and you follow it and doors open, and the creative process in general. If you have an idea, if you feel called to create something, whether it's writing a book or producing a play or sewing dresses, I think that's what this life is about, is exploring that and following that. And so I started a podcast a couple of years back called Cove Pod, the Carganilla online variety entertainment podcast, and in which I could talk to creators who are inspired to do stuff. And because I just love that. I'm inspired by people who do things because they're inspired. And my first season of that was 40 episodes, and of that 40 episodes, 8 of my guests were Titanic, rooted in Titanic. And I was like, am I alienating people who are coming to this podcast that don't really care about Titanic? What if I did like a sub podcast? But I was afraid that the podcast world was too saturated. So I talked to a couple of people, and one of the gals I reached out to was LA Beatles, and I said, I have this idea I really want to do. Like, do you think there's a place for it in the Titanic community right now? And she said, well, Paul, what do you always tell your guests on your show? If your heart's fire is lit, follow it. And I did, and I've just met so many amazing people who I now can call my friends through doing it. And Nelson's right, like, we put out an episode and maybe 50 people listen to it this week, but it's gonna be out there. And somebody falls in love with the Titanic story down the line, and they can find us, and they can be a part of the conversation as well. Now, having said that, you also mentioned that there's a lot of people feel ownership over their Titanic feelings, and so with everything you put out there, obviously, with art in general, when you create something, you show it to people to judge, and there's been a lot of chatter about how the Titanic community can be snappy, can get very protective of their own piece of Titanic. What has your experience been on that end of the spectrum?
Speaking not necessarily Titanic-wise, but I know from having written 9 books, you get very used to kind reviews and 5-star reviews on Amazon, and then some individual comes along and gives you 1 star, and you can't have a thin skin about opinion. It's just an opinion, even if it messes with your rating. However, I learned a long time ago, and I talk about it in the Raindrops books, I get a lot of mileage out of the expression, that's showbiz, because that's showbiz, and it's not just showbiz, it's all biz. But sometimes you're hot, and sometimes you're not, and you can't take it personally. So that's why, I can't cite something specific within the Titanic community, but I can cite the specificity of how supportive, surprisingly supportive, I've found it, especially since we started podcasting.
Yeah, coming from the THG side first, we've had a storied history, and different members of the team have come and gone, and we've interacted with so much of the community, and the group's been around for over a decade. So there's when I got more heavily involved a couple of years ago in their project, one of the things that I did was I created new rules of how we interact with the community. No more engaging, no more reacting to anyone. If there is a comment that is upsetting you, send it to me and let me deal with it. If you can't,
Kill it.
And because I think and the guys make fun of me, I have a very corporate speak when I'm dealing with negativity when people are upset. I will send back the kindest email, and every single time the response is shock and kindness back. Like, they had no idea I would read their message. They had no idea I would listen to them. And at the end of the day, that's all people really want to be, is listened to and valued. And so we've sort of tried to, and we're not always perfect, but tried to flip that around and sort of fight back the negativity, which is, I do think the Titanic community can be snippy, as you said, but social media has made us this way more than anything. I think social media is making us not worse people. I don't want to be too extreme about it, but it makes us less kind as the years go by, the less that we talk to people face to face. Because the second, if I could speak to any of the people who have said negative things about my podcast or THG, they would never have said the thing they said, because they aren't hiding behind the computer anymore. And that's just everybody, it's human nature or whatever. So it's tough to deal with, but fighting back with a little bit of kindness and killing with kindness kind of thing has always been great. And I have found with my podcast sort of starting fresh with like a sort of a different community. There's lots of overlap, of course. We have lots of people here who listen to my podcast and then also love THG or whatever. But I end all of my podcasts with "Be kind to each other, Titanic community," because that's what I want. And I have noticed in the comments of my videos when two people disagree about something that I've brought up, particularly an episode I did about Bruce's, there's lots of debate that happened in the comments. And there were two individuals who it started the way that Titanic discussions on Facebook usually start. And very quickly, one of them took the kind route and the other one followed, and they both agreed that they were both saying the same thing at the end of the day. And it was the nicest thing. And I said it on my next episode, I was like, whoever you two are, that is exactly what I mean. So yes, it is out there. It's hard to deal with sometimes, but you have to have a thick skin, but also it doesn't have to be that way.
I can add to that too as a more general note. I think that all of us are coming from a very genuine, sincere place. Don't mean to come up with theories or memories for us or conspiracies, to use a sort of pejorative term, to deliberately antagonize or start an antagonistic debate. We're here, we're discussing. It's called discussion. It's called a two-way conversation. It's not what I just said is absolute fact. It's like, is it fact? Let's talk about it. It's how I make my movies. It's called development. Like, this is the script, but it's probably not going to be exactly what we shoot. We're going to go through many, many rewrites. We're going to be there on the day and then change something or add something because we're standing up on the location. And if you come from a place of sincerity, and a very eminent actor friend of mine who I worked with said, best idea wins. And this goes back to the leadership stuff that Kelly was talking about yesterday. You cannot be the auteur that just says, no, we're doing it this way or no way, especially in a collaborative environment like filmmaking. And now when you take it to podcasting, there are thousands and thousands of people all over the world listening to our voices with all of their thousands and thousands of opinions and points of view. And one or two of those are going to make a point of coming in and having an argy-pargy, say, in England. And they're free to do that. But our heads hit the pillows at night, knowing that we are doing our best with sincerity and with gifts and sharing. It's like, I've got all this stuff, I want to share it with you. So I ended up making a movie about it,
Well, and the podcast specifically are our passion projects. They're not our livelihoods, where we'd be in big trouble, you know. Please buy my mug. So we're not creating clickbait to get people to come in. We're doing this out of our own personal enthusiasm and passion and wanting to share and wanting to have a community.
Desire to connect.
And if we were doing it for the money, it would be a completely different thing, and it wouldn't exist.
I came from a very creative family, and what I loved so much about, I did theater in high school. I was in band and choir, and I loved getting together with a creative family and creating one thing that we're presenting to an audience together. And in a lot of ways, this podcast, even though we're just, if we're a solo host, we're bringing guests on, it starts to feel like a family that we're all a part of. And I'm going to just say this now before I jump back into this consciousness, but we're going to ask for live studio audience questions in a few minutes, so start to prep them. It'll be a first. You can be on the first studio audience podcast asking Q&A. But connecting with people this weekend here on the Queen Mary, meeting all of you, being able to look into your eyes has just been so special. You mentioned like social media is changing the way that we interact with people, and so I've said thank you a million times this week, and I'll say it again. Thank you all for being here and connecting with us. I know so many of you came from out of state to be here, and it's not easy to get on this ship. So just being in the room with you is such a blessing, and it feels so very special to me. And we need to do more of this. COVID came and killed a lot of conventions and meetings, and they just haven't gotten back up yet. So I'm hoping that this starts. Alexandra and Nelson told me that I'm doing this again next year, so next year you can come back and join us.
We recorded it. It's going out on social media tomorrow, so just suck it up.
But I mentioned, meeting the three of you through listening to podcasts, but there's another arm of that is I reach out and I say, hey, you haven't met me, but I listened to this and I'd like to connect with you. And then hearing a response back, hi, I got it, yeah, let's chat. Like, before social media, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
So
They called it stalking.
It's a double-edged sword, kind of. We love.
And then you get to go to Poseidon Adventure
Yeah,
screenings.
I've been stalking before all of you were born.
If you missed it last night, tell the story from your presentation about you telling your dad you'll never be able to do that.
Oh, no, I mean, you gotta just take a shot at things. And my lifelong love affair and friendship with Poseidon Adventure actress Carol Lindley was basically daring my father with his bravado, I'm the king of the universe behavior, that he couldn't get me a date with Carol Lindley. And I mean, if ever a father did something for a son, he got me a date with Carol Lindley that ended up, after age 15, that ended up being a friendship that lasted until her passing. So give everything a shot. I mean, if there's ever a lesson, and I at one point in my life said to my dad, how can I ever repay you for that, Dad? And he said, well, do something like that for your son. And I mean, it was just that simple. There were no strings attached. And I watched Paul with his kids. I watched Greg with his kids. And that's all, just love your family, love your friends, love your partner, and do something nice for them. It's amazing how it comes back to you.
I remember when I was, an aspiring actress, I was still at school, and I'd get completely starstruck by theatre actors who would come to my city and do Hamlet. I remember Derek Jacobi did Hamlet, and I just went and saw it like 3 times, and it turned out it was the same production of Hamlet that Kenneth Branagh saw. He's the same age as me, and it inspired. I heard him tell the same story. Like, that was his moment. Like, that's what I'm doing. It's all done. And I'd say to my mum, and I think this time I'm going to go backstage, and I'm going to have Derek Jacobi for his autograph. And I just, and I'd watch him walk past me in the bar, and I'm like, oh God, I missed that moment, because I would just be so frozen with awe at this of an actor. And my mum said, don't you think those actors love it when somebody comes up to them and says, you are my hero, I'm so inspired? And I was like, oh, yeah, I think I'd like that too. And now, 40 years later, I get to experience that back in very small, delicate, but powerful ways. And if there's anyone here who aspires to be an actor, remember what my mum said, but also come up and tell me how fabulous I am. Do not be shy. You know what I'm saying? It's like and again, this subject of this boat, this ship, is an incredible equalizer. It's an incredible equalizer that brings everybody into the room, and everybody's got not just a point of view, but a point of an origin point of what brought them. Usually, it's I saw the film at 6, or I saw a book in middle school, and we did a school project or whatever. We've heard them all, but they're all quite similar, and they're all connected by Titanic. I've seen lives changed because of the connection I have to somebody, and through the thread. I was telling you the story through Titanic, and here we are. And I reckon in another 10 years, another 113 years, we'll be gone. But I bet you they'll be talking about Titanic.
Listening to Titanic Talk podcast.
The archives. When they used to do everything digitally rather than virtually. Why did they do that?
You make such a great point, because I was even having the conversation with my beautiful wife when we were getting ready for this weekend. It's just like, who am I? Who do I think I am inviting Dawn Lynch to be a part of my event?
That's a fire, huh?
Yes.
Woo! Woo, that's quite thrilling. Is it the red arrows or something?
We either got buzzed, for anybody watching out there, we just got buzzed by the team of F-16 or something.
Those were jets.
But
Women and children first.
on the same level, it's like, who am I to be trying to send a DM to Alexandra Boyd after I just watched her movie, and then she writes me right back, and it's like, but I'm like, you responded. She's like, of course, I'd love to connect with you about this. It's a compliment to the people that you look up to and respect, but also, and this is a theme that I explore often on my creativity podcast, CoPod, you gotta ask. Nothing will happen if you don't ask. The worst that's gonna happen is they say, I'm busy. And then what? What are you out? Nothing. So, if anybody out there, if I can inspire you to do something.
Ask a question,
It's
Paul.
just ask.
Yeah, ask a question.
All right.
Put it to the audience.
Any final thoughts about podcasting before we open it up to any questions?
I'd like to say if somebody's got something they want to make a podcast about, it couldn't be easier. You can either write a script or you can chat with your friends, and we do it on Zoom. Nelson lives in New York, I live in Washington, in the middle of nowhere.
She's got her pugs making noise. I've got the sirens in New York.
It couldn't be easier. Somebody was asking about what platform. We all use Buzzsprout, and it's about $12 a month to host it. It goes out on every ping, every podcast platform. It's that easy. Just set up your phone or a little, if you can get one of those Yeti mics or whatever. Doesn't have to be sophisticated. And in fact, talking about sirens and pugs snoring and
Flyovers.
Ridgebacks barking like basket. It actually adds to the immediacy of it. We're not in a studio, there is ambient sound, and I let a lot of that go. My film maker, the audio isn't right, the sound isn't crisp and perfect. It actually, don't worry about any of that. It will still sound professional if you come from a place of sincerity and heart.
That's it, but that's the most important thing. I was going to say during COVID, I was part of a morning television show that broadcast every day from a television studio. I did it for 30 years until COVID, and I started having to broadcast from home through my phone. It was bad news for me because I didn't enjoy the technical aspects of it. I didn't think I looked as good. There were problems. However, there I am doing Zoom interviews with George Clooney and Julia Roberts and all the A-list stars. But they liked, who did the painting behind you? And I told my bosses, no green screen. Let's not put the Hollywood sign behind me. It's COVID. I'm in my house. Let me be in my house. So a siren, but the people became very intrigued with with our artwork. So it's about being yourself. That's the success key for any job in any industry, I think.
Absolutely. All right. Any questions from our audience? Oh, first question. State your name and ask your question, please.
I think everyone knows me, but okay. I'm Everly, and my question is, say you're planning for like an hour podcast. What do you do if you run out of things to say?
I don't think any of us ever run out
It's
of
not ever a problem, really. You call
Take
it's
questions.
It's called vamping, Emily, vamping in the business.
No, I've definitely never run out of
You never had to
anything,
vamp, no?
But if I was lucky enough for that to happen, where, oh my gosh, I think I'm done early, I would tell myself, don't stress. This week's episode is gonna be 30 minutes long. And
That's
okay.
right. There's
Because
no
I feel like I
rules
have
of
to- It always has to be a certain length.
There's
but-
no rules of engagement. We do 40 minutes because that's when the free Zoom runs out.
When in doubt, sing the morning after.
I guess that means we have 7 minutes left. So. In the back here. Oh wow, I feel like I'm in a studio.
Hi, I'm Frankie. I'm an aspiring creative, and I wanted to ask, what do you guys do when you have a big idea, but you're having these self-doubts that maybe the idea is cringe or bad, or people are just going to be like, what is wrong with you for making this?
Well, it's almost like anything. I have a charitable foundation that encourages women, young women in particular, to become filmmakers because it's very lonely out here. And there certainly was no support for that when I was your age, and the only path into the performing arts was acting, dancing and then acting. And I consider I came to directing and writing far too late, because I never saw anybody else doing it. And in your world and in the social media world, you see people, you hear these TikTok stars, these people who have millions of followers, they all just did it. And they're doing it in their bedrooms or in their garages or whatever. And I would not have any doubt in your mind, do not, any little person on your shoulder going, me, listen to this one, this guy, do it.
But not to say you shouldn't have feedback. Like Alexandra and I, if you have a trusted friend or colleague, you do get value from constructive criticism. And you have to have someone in your life that you trust enough
a mentor or
to
something
tell
like
you
that.
what might be cringe. That's okay too. You can do it anyway.
Yeah.
What's cringe to one person might just be
True.
honey to somebody else.
True.
Yeah, truly, nothing could be a better example than a Titanic podcast. There's 3 of them represented here. I was, believe it or not, had my haircut recently, and I was like 3 days ago. So I was telling my haircut person what I do.
Old hairdressers.
And I was telling her what I do, and I mentioned all the Titanic stuff, and usually people light up and they're like, oh, I used to love, when I was a kid, or oh, I get it. Like, people understand, but every now and then you get a person like this. She just didn't get it. She was like, it's a disaster. I'm like, yeah, but you kind of forget about that sometimes. It's
He used to have bangs.
Yeah. But like, she just wasn't on my wavelength about it, and she wouldn't enjoy this event, and that's fine. But if she was the person I was worried about, I guess I would never have made the podcast. But it's just those random nice comments that you get on YouTube, or a little email that I get from people who just say the sweetest things, and it's like, I'm making this for you, and I don't care if this person thinks it's dumb or this person thinks it's cringe or whatever. You have to just follow the thing that, like we were saying earlier, that lights you up inside. If you feel excitement while you work on something, you have to follow it through. You've got to do it.
Absolutely. He just touched on two main things. It's like, if any creative who's doing creative work is doing it because they want to. And yes, you do have to think about your audience in certain scenarios, but when you're starting out, I considered every project that I was working on as like a year in film school, or a new lesson to learn. And you're not gonna learn those lessons unless you're doing it. So until you get to the point where you're being commissioned to make something for money, I wouldn't care try not to think about what the audience is going to react, how the audience is going to react at all. You're doing it for yourself because you're passionate about it, and everything that you do, you're going to learn from.
Do you know the writer? He was a stand-up comedian, also Charlie Brooker, who created Black Mirror. And I read an interview with him after the first or second series, and he said at the beginning of your career and the end of your career, you can do exactly what you want. So when you're an independent creator, nobody's paying you to do it, you can do exactly what you want. Then you'll become super famous and super rich, and everybody will be it'll be about the money, 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 until you get to a point where you're like James Cameron, you're like, I'm going to do exactly what I want. But that middle bit, you have to dance to the tune of the people with the purse strings. But now is the time. We haven't done anything before when, like, dance like nobody's watching, sing like nobody's listening. That this is the time to really just experiment and fail and succeed and just see what happens. Throw that wet spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, and nothing's wrong with failure, and nothing's wrong. I mean, you will get fired from a job one day. That's life. No job lasts forever. Even, I thought Search for Tomorrow would go on forever, and one day it was canceled.
Stop searching.
Yeah, it's okay to fall down.
Absolutely, and to that point, if you are starting a podcast, don't worry about the numbers. Do not look at the numbers. You're doing it for yourself, and the more you do it, the more you learn, and hopefully the more fulfillment you find in it. I think we got time for about one or two more questions here.
Yes,
in the back. Let me run up there. Play the music, Johnny.
I was going to say after the stock market this week, that's what I was saying, don't look at the numbers.
I'm Lisa. I have a question. Polly, you said that there was a lot of niches in Titanic that needed to be explored yet. What are some of those, do you think, that still need exploring? Since I'm toying with the idea of possibly doing this.
I think my comment about niches was just like things in the world that people get interested in and want to listen to things about. I think if you're starting a podcast about something very general, the audience will have a hard time finding you. So if you do want to start a show, make it very specific. We're talking about this. On mine, the reason I was like, does Titanic need another one? I wanted to talk to creatives because that's what I love to do. So I talked to, authors, filmmakers. I talked to the Magellan guys who did the scan because they put out the video game, the VROV game, and they didn't even mention this whole documentary that just dropped on Friday and our whole conversation about the
I guess that'll be my thing. I'll just step into it. Like with the testimonials for my podcast, it was just something I was already so passionate about, loved, and thankfully no one's really talking about it in the podcast world. But like a topic that keeps coming up more recently in your talk yesterday, there's very, very little to find research-wise on the lifestyles of passengers and like LGBTQ potential passengers. Like anytime I read a little something about that, I'm always so fascinated because it doesn't get talked about a lot. So that's, but that's just like one thing. But there's so much going on aboard Titanic but as long as it's something that you have a personal connection to, that's I think more important than finding a niche that no one's touched yet. If your thing is like you just love first class passengers, like they're the most covered class of them all, but if it's your passion, you'll find the right way to talk about it.
And Titanic was a floating city with all the demographics. And so if you look at what are the problems that face a city, whatever that issue might be, it was an issue on Titanic. So if Titanic's your thing, you can choose from a myriad topics to exploit, to investigate.
You never hear from the second class passengers.
Underrated. What about Lawrence Beasley?
Middle
When
class,
is he going to
second
speak
class
up?
passengers. I went to, there's a Seattle exhibition, Titanic exhibition, I went to that, and again, I'm like, well, there's a deck chair. Oh, there's a menu holder that I'm still holding out to find. I'll go for a prop. I don't need a real one. And there were stories all the way through the exhibition of people I had never heard of. Because of course I've heard of John Jacob Astor. Of course I've heard of Molly Brown. Of course I've heard of, and the third class passengers were represented in Titanic, and there's been books and, survivor testimonies and descendant testimonies and so forth. What about the second class passengers? Fine, and it was fascinating. There's 2,000 stories, and plus the crew, plus and then a descendant story, somebody who's living with the legacy of the story. It's going down through the generations. That's quite a well-known one, but maybe second class passengers.
Sexuality, race, finance,
Nationality.
class, national identity. It's a floating city.
Immigrants,
full
the
of
immigrants
problems.
that were coming over,
You could go the technical route and count the rivets, or you could tell the stories of the people.
I think the rivets have been counted.
I've been
Clinton, I'm
blessed.
looking at you.
Over the past couple of months, I've gotten to dig into the stories of survivors I hadn't heard before. We're going to hear later today about Selene Asbeck, from her granddaughter who's here presenting, and I got to talk to the daughter of Sydney Daniels, who was the last surviving steward, and just like these connections and these stories are so fascinating. I think that's part of why Titanic. We could have a 3-hour conversation about why Titanic draws people in, but I think a huge part of it is telling people stories and remembering them. We got time for one last one. Here we go.
So my name is Trevor, and let's end off with something fun. So, what's the most embarrassing moment that you've had on your podcast?
Yeah. So this isn't from my podcast specifically, but it's from the THG side of things, but it's online, on a microphone. Because I don't think I can do anything embarrassing on my podcast because I edit the heck out of it. I spend way too much time editing it, so it sounds perfect. But no, one time we were doing a live stream for THG, and it was an update thing. We were just going to go through. I prepped it. I work so hard on these dumb things that are over in 30 minutes, and most of the comments are negative, and it's like, oh my God, I just spent a month on that. But I put together this meticulous slideshow that was going to beautifully explain something that we were working on. And we get to the we're 30 minutes in, and I click go on the slideshow to start talking about it, and the pictures are all gone. And I can't see them. They're it's just black images after black images. And I'm on trying to figure it out, and we're live, and there's a couple thousand people watching, and I'm like, oh no, so I'm like vamping and pulling up other things, and I'm like, oh, guys, I'm so sorry. And I spent maybe 5 minutes, and that's like the longest 5 minutes of your life, so whatever. Okay, the stream ends, and I click the end. I click the button that mutes my microphone and ends the stream. The stream's still going, but no one can see or hear me. And I go, and I'm sitting there talking to the guys after, like, I don't know what the hell happened. And I'm going through these things, and then the pictures pop up, and I click this button, and I go, and I drop a rather inappropriate word, and go, are you? I have this, it's so good. And everyone's, James. When I opened up that file, I was pressing the button that turns my mic on, and the chat is going nuts. Because people, it had only been 10 seconds since it ended, and a lot of people had left, but I turned it off, and I put out a little thing, like, apologizing, like, it was very funny, but I was mortified. My heart was racing so much. I know our community, and of course, somebody got in there before I could edit it out, and they recorded it, and then it's out there for me just going, so, yeah, that was
Ship of memes.
Have we had any embarrassing moments?
No, I think this feeds into the thing about authenticity, and if you're yourself, sounds, bodily functions, or whatever, whatever, it's just real, and certainly in the podcast world, that's what they want. And my background was in 30 years of live television. I could never do what actors do on a set. It would drive me insane to sit around and wait to do the same. I mean, to me that seems like insanity. Waiting to do the same 3 seconds that might end up on the cutting room floor. The live TV, once it's done, you're done. And to me, if you mess up, just keep going. So that's why I don't think we've ever been embarrassed. Never.
Not yet, no.
That means the first time is coming.
Yes, I was going to say, don't jinx it, yeah.
I love doing it live and keeping it as close to what the first recording was as possible because it saves me less time editing. And I don't think I've had anything on my Titanic podcast, but back during COVID, we were doing weekly live streams from the house. We'd be playing music and singing songs and doing plays and stuff. And several times, the quintessential door opening and someone walking in when they're not supposed to would happen. And I remember one specific time my son came in his diaper and just opened the door and started walking around behind me while I was like singing some dramatic song on a live stream. I was like, don't worry about him. At least he's got his diaper on.
It's like that COVID interview on the BBC when the guy's talking about finance or something and his wife's coming in to grab the toddler. Something like that. That was viral.
Well, I want to thank Alexandra Nelson and Mr. Penca here for joining us here at Titanic Weekend. I want to thank everybody here in the room. Give it up for yourself. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
The live stream is still going, so if you want to get up awkwardly and just hang on.
Time, Jan. Your time.
Oh yeah, let's embarrass ourselves now.